Does everybody know everybody? Kind of. Okay. Más o menos. All right. I think the first time I had the opportunity to speak in the same time, the same place with Radhanath Maharaj was this, where Radhadasi was describing, in this wonderful temple in the downtown area of Bombay, and it was very wonderful. It's always very nice being with, and since then it's happened several times, actually several times in our Chicago temple. But somehow, I haven't been in San Diego, and I can't even count the number. I have more than my toes and fingers. So many years ago that I came. And just coincidentally, with Radhanath Maharaj at the same time. So I'm happy to be with him and together to be with you. We were asked to speak on the same topic, so just take the topic and expand the topic. And the topic is loving relationships. I'll say maybe 5 things about it, and he'll say everything I didn't say, and then more. One of my favorite sayings about Krishna consciousness is it's all about relationships. Ultimately, our relationship with God. The essence of our deeper and true happiness in life certainly is found in loving relationships. And when loving relationships have God at the center, or even we'll be more specific and say Krishna at the center, then loving relationships are true and enduring and endearing. Just a little sharing, a little anecdotal piece. There's a devotee couple somewhere on this planet, and they're very skilled at family counseling. For some years they did as a profession, and now as devotees they're just naturally doing that in their association with others. So there's another couple. He's a very nice devotee. She's a very nice devotee, and they got married. Then something happened a little bit later. A little friction in their marriage. So she went and he went and to get counseling, and it wasn't working out, it wasn't working out. And I suggested, why don't you try this very nice couple that I know? They're very good. So they went and worked out, just like that. So I spoke to the wife and said, wow, congratulations, you have a magic touch. She said it was really simple. She said, I just reminded them of why they got married. and she said, there's a saying that's, I'm holding up my hand like this, there's a saying from Mother Teresa, that the bottom line of which is, I'll come to the bottom line, but there's a whole series of statements where it says, she put this on her wall in Calcutta, and if you try to be generous and kind to other people, they may take advantage of you. Be kind anyway. If you try to go out of your way to assist other people, some persons may fault you, though you have some motivation. Be kind anyway. If you work your whole life and try to develop something that's a very wonderful offering to the world, in a short period of time thereafter, somebody may dismantle the whole thing very quickly, build something very wonderful anyway. And like a whole series of these things like that. If you act with selflessness, people will criticize you, you have some motivations. Act selflessly anyway. And then the whole series. And at the end, it was something like this. And in the final analysis, it's not between you and them, it's in relation to God anyway. She said, I just shared this with this couple that, you got married because here's a spiritual personality attracted to spiritual life, here's another, and you want to be together and take shelter of Krishna and serve Krishna together. You forgot that somehow. Just remember that. That's the essence of the bond between and the affection that you have for each other. There may be this friction point and that friction point. But don't forget, it's all about your relationship with God anyway. Because when the relationship with God is right, then it's very easy to have relationships, loving relationships with others. And minus that, it's another kind of a relationship that has its sticky points and sometimes friction points and sometimes explosive points. That's one, sharing. Another is hearing, just like we're doing this evening, coming together and hearing what we say in the language of the Bhagavatam, Krishna Katha, or topics about Krishna. Just hearing topics about Krishna. Kathayantas chamam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha, a verse from Bhagavad Gita. Krishna describes the nature of persons who are feeling satisfied, tushti, at heart, feeling very peaceful, and ramanti, very happy, jubilant in heart. And how does that jubilation and satisfaction come? It comes from their hearing and discussing together spiritual sound vibration topics. So I'm going to read just one verse from a section of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is about that big in its translation and commentary. It's spoken by one of the great liberated souls, like perfected souls, called Uttama Bhagavat personalities. There are 9 sons amongst the 100 sons of Rishabdev. Rishabdev is an incarnation of Krishna, and his teachings eventually became the Jain religion. So, being nonviolent and respecting life, the principles of Rishabdev's teachings became the teachings, principles of the Jain religion. So amongst his 100 sons, some number of them became learned priestly personalities. Another number of them became kings and ruled the earth. And another 9 just became perfectly realized transcendentalists. And they were very gifted. They had powers, mystic powers, whereby they could travel not just anywhere on earth, but anywhere at will, just by their willing to do so. They were totally detached from worldly things and totally fixed in all spiritual things. So one day, they happened to be in a place where a great king named Maharaj Nimi was performing a sacrifice, a ritual. And as he was in the midst of preparing just to begin the ritual, here come these 9 effulgent personalities, each of them effulgent like many suns, like the one that's setting over there. And he stopped everything, and he immediately stood up. And by the way, you're not supposed to do that. When you're doing those kind of rituals, you complete them. He didn't. He just stopped and approached these effulgent personalities and said, I don't know who you are, but you're obviously something very wonderful. And I think it is in my best interest if I inquire from you about higher purposes of life. And so he presented a number of questions, and each of them responded with answers to his different questions. So it's a very wonderful section, very deep and profound. And there's one verse by one of them. His name is Antariksha, which means beyond what you can see. That's what his name means. And he was explaining about loving relationships. Nice, huh? And in his description, he expresses, I'll read the verse, but let's paraphrase first. He expresses that when spiritually minded persons, now I don't know you, but I understand about you that you're spiritually minded persons of different backgrounds and different persuasions and so forth, but spiritually minded persons. So he says, when spiritually minded persons come together and they discuss topics about transcendence, specifically topics about Krishna, then something happens, like magic happens, like spiritual magic happens. And their hearts become soft, their hearts become cleansed, and loving relationships ensue. I'll read the verse and then just explain a little bit. One should learn how to associate with the devotees of the Lord by gathering with them to chant the glories of the Lord. This process is most purifying. As devotees thus develop their loving friendship, they feel mutual happiness and mutual satisfaction, and by thus encouraging one another, they are able to give up material sense gratification, which is the cause of all suffering. Oh, part of what we were doing earlier, the singing, is just names of the Supreme Lord. And whatever the language one, whatever the culture one comes from, one of the places that I visit, because I just like the people so much, is China. I made a commitment to regularly go to China. And one of the things I like about the Chinese people, appreciate very much, is there isn't a word in the Chinese language for God. Like when they had to translate Bhagavad Gita, there isn't a Chinese word for it. And what does that mean? Because words are symbols, they don't even have a concept, so they don't have a word to match the concept for God. You follow? It's not like when they chant, it's not like they've got a mental concept that they're latching onto. They don't have one. It's the sound itself. And the sound itself acts in such a way that it awakens a dormant, like a seed that's dormant becomes awakened and it sprouts. Like put a seed in some moisture and exposed to the sun and it'll sprout. It can sit in a jar or in a bag or in a box or something but just with the elements that make a seed sprout, it sprouts. And similarly, attraction for Krishna awakens just by sound. It's not a cultural thing, it's not a language thing, it's not a notional thing. It's a spiritual thing. So when I'm sitting with a group of people that are Chinese and we're having kirtan, I'm just picturing the seed of attraction for Krishna that's awakening just by that sound. Because not their language, again, it's not their language, meaning doesn't matter. It's the spiritual sound acts. And as that spiritual sound acts, and it awakens that dormant attraction of love for Krishna, and then naturally for those who are vibrating that sound together, the sound of Krishna and the sound of name of Krishna, the topics of Krishna, the message of Krishna, and the form of Krishna, the qualities of Krishna, the devotees of Krishna, loving relationships awaken. There's, in the verse, in case you happen to be a Sanskrit scholar in the audience, 3 times one same word is used. And the word is mitaha. Mitaha means mutual. It says mutual loving attraction, mutual satisfaction, and mutually becoming detached from the miseries of the world. Just by sound vibration. So that's one of the reasons why we're very enthusiastic about these books, and hearing and discussing these books with one another and with others and whoever, because it fosters loving relationships. So I encourage you, kirtan, and topics about Krishna, spiritual sound vibration, this descending from the spiritual world into this realm. Hear those sound vibrations and something awakens. Love towards Krishna, love towards those who are similarly engaged and attracted to Krishna. That's the second point. And the last 3 points I'll bundle together and I'm done. One of the places that I like very much is we have a farm community in mid-Pennsylvania. And there's lots of cows, cows, and fantastic land. It's the land that the farm was purchased not because it was near a temple, that was a mistake, but the land itself it's some of the most fertile land anywhere. It's where there's lots of Amish farmers in the territory because it's really good land. And so every year for the last, I don't know, between 25 and 30 years, I've been going there, conducting retreats at the farm, and slowly, their facilities have expanded, and it's a very nice place. And 2 years ago, during the Memorial Day weekend, we held a retreat, the theme of which was loving relationships, just like this evening. So instead of 25, 30 hours worth of loving relationships conversation, this is a 20-minute one. It's a very wonderful topic, and certainly by discussing the topic, contemplating the topic, sharing, discussing the topic, you can imagine what happened. That the being tuned in to the importance of and how to grow. So this is a little bit like practical things, and then Maharaj can speak all the inspirational things. So 3 practical things, along with hearing topics about Krishna, and remembering that Krishna is at the center of all of our relationships when there's genuine love. 3 things. One is respect. When relationships, we'll say negatively, when relationships break down, before the relationship breaks down, respect breaks down. You've heard the expression, I'm sure, familiarity breeds contempt. So here's 2 people that they don't know each other so well, but when they come together, they like each other, and then they separate. They think, well, that's a nice person, and that's a nice person. So they start to become friends, or they get married, or something like that. You know, just the relationship gets closer. And when the relationship gets closer, you find out all the good, the bad, the mix about the person. Those of you that are married, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You find all about the weaknesses and the strengths and the idiosyncrasies of the person that you are now living with. And with that can come familiarity. And with familiarity, it breeds, doesn't have to, but commonly it breeds contempt. I know your ugly stuff, and you know all my ugly stuff, and one points to the other their ugly stuff, and respect disappears, becomes something else besides a relationship. Becomes very dysfunctional. So how to have a close relationship, a loving relationship, it's essential that there's respect. Even if you know all the shortcomings of the other person, to still respect the other person. Because otherwise, how can you have a loving relationship? I didn't have the kind of relationship that Radhanath Maharaj had with Bhakti Tirtha Swami, but I had enormous admiration for him. And when I stay at our farm in Gitanagari, the place where I stay is the place where Bhakti Tirtha Swami, who's now departed from this world, he would stay. And on the wall, there's this nice saying about a friend. And it goes something like this. A friend is one who knows you. They know where you've been. They know what your shortcomings are. They accept you for who you are. And at the same time, very gently, they continue to encourage you to grow. So when you become close to someone, and there's some feelings of love for that someone, and you know their shortcomings, you see their strength, and in the mood of friendship and love, in a gentle manner, you consider what I can do for this wonderful person and help them take a doable step of growth in a way that's wholesome and will make them happy and so forth. So it's like in a friendly, nurturing kind of mode, instead of with respect for the core of their inner value. Our teaching as a devotee, our Vaishnava teaching, is we respect all forms of life. Sometimes Prabhupada would say even an ant, meaning like something insignificant. So what to speak of someone significant? What to speak of someone who's carrying in their heart an aspiration for coming closer to God, for getting in closer touch with their spiritual essence, despite their shortcomings. Respect, minimally, respect goes to the fact that within that blade of grass, or that ant crawling on the ground, or the bird in the tree, or whatever, the tree itself, there's a spirit soul. And that spirit soul is spiritually part and parcel of the Supreme Soul. So I respect. Now it's in the body of a tree, or a bird, or an ant, or a blade of grass, or another person, another human. But there's intrinsic worth within this form of life. And I respect that. And that form of life is part of that soul's transmigration and moving according to the laws of nature through the different species of life, or in the human form of life. If there's aspiration to reach the supreme goal of life, how wonderful. I respect that. And there's differences. Differences I respect also. But the essence is especially the place where the respect goes. Now, how can I be of service in respect of that very special quality of that individual? And I'll say the reverse again. When respect starts to fade and even disappear, you can't have a relationship with another person or that person. It's essential for loving relationships. So it's a very essential, not just nice, but it's an essential part of loving relationships. So when we associate with others, It's not just a Pollyanna message, so you look for the good, but there's good. There's intrinsic worth within every person. And see that. Seek it. Find it. Encourage it. Nourish it. Appreciate it. And on the strength of that respect, then also how I can be of service to help this other person, and how they be willing to receive their input also, how they can help me be a better person, come closer to that ultimate goal of attaining the Supreme. Then just 2 other points and I'm done. Now each of these points that I'm speaking was like, long description with different scriptural references and looking from different angles. Because of our time, I'm just speaking some practical points, or trying. For loving relationships, there's a group of us who get together from time to time in a scheduled manner. Like your counselors, we're calling them mentors. So we have meeting or gatherings amongst those who are doing extending care, spiritual care to others. And our appreciation is that as we who are extending spiritual care to others, if we want to model what that spiritual care to others is, it's so much dependent upon our spiritual care for one another. How we extend our relationships with one another. And one of the things that, again, breaks down or blocks that kind of loving relationship is where we're not sure we trust the other person. So if we want loving relationships that are based upon trust, the first and foremost thing is to become trustworthy ourselves. It's a nice topic. In fact, I spoke on it in China. And they get it too. There are things that if we do certain things, like, simple things. If you give your word, keep your word. You say to somebody something. Maharaj, we're going to have a call tomorrow at 9:30. We're going to have a call tomorrow at 9:30 on something. So I'm going to be there at 9:30. I know he'll be there at 9:30 because he's trustworthy. He's not going to say, yeah, I'll be there, and then etc. Keep your word. Once you give your word, be careful what words you give. When you give your word, keep your word. And the opposite, if someone gives their word and they're not going to keep it, do you trust the person? And confidentiality. You don't need to expand on that one too much. Someone shares something with you in confidence, and next thing you know, it's all over the universe. Is that person going to share something in confidence with you again? Probably not. And if they're not going to share something in confidence, it's due to a lack of trust. Without the long list, because of the time, consider those things that you find in others that make you trust others, and try to be that yourself. Be trustworthy, and it invokes trust, and then you can have loving relationships, because in loving relationships, according to our acharyas, our teachers, predecessor teachers, one of the symptoms of a loving relationship is disclosing one's mind in confidence and hearing others disclose their mind to you in confidence. But there may be reluctance to disclose one's mind in confidence if one isn't trustworthy. What are you going to do with that information? So be trustworthy, and it fosters loving relationships. It's something I can practically do. Be a trustworthy person. And then, because there's so many lonely people in the world, they'd like without exception. Everyone wants to love others and experience love of others for them. It's universal. Love and be loved. So start with being trustworthy. And final thing, I mentioned it already, but it's certainly worth repeating. Have a proper spiritual conception of others. I'm just going to share now something that I present in colleges. One of the things I present in colleges is about relationships. And it takes 45 minutes, but the punchline is, if I don't understand the other person properly and the other person doesn't understand me and I try to have a relationship with them, what is it? And to understand another person without having truly a spiritual conception, because that's who the other person is, a spiritual being, and nor a spiritual conception of myself, and I try to have a loving relationship, it's going to be something else. Good try, but it's going to be something else. If we want to have very real, genuine, sustainable, durable, happy, loving relationships, we have to come to the spiritual conception of ourselves and of others. Vidya vanaya sampane brahmani gavi hastani shuni chaiva supaki cha pandita samadarshana, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Pandita means learned person, who can see that the spiritual equality of all living beings, regardless of their life form or who they are or where they've come from or their culture or their background or their religion or their race or their whatever. The spiritual quality and more broadly the spiritual equality. So many differences. But the spiritual foundation of myself and others, and together let us then consider us a loving relationship with one another, where based on these points already mentioned, especially this hearing of descending spiritual sound vibrations together, cleansing, mutually feeling some happiness, mutually feeling the upliftment and cleansing, and appreciating that mutual connection with the Supreme, then going forward step by step in acting, developing, and acting within a loving relationship with one another. These are like little building blocks or practical items that can foster loving relationships. So we had a pre-agreement, and I'm going to keep it, that I would speak for a little while and then Maharaj would speak. So he'll give you all the inspirational part. You can see, you take some of the nuts and bolts, put that together with the inspirational part, and put together some loving relationships.